Hello, did you see our first video on this topic? If you haven't watched it, please go back to the channel and watch the first part. It's unmissable. In this second part, we will delve into some important points and would like to know your opinion in the comments. See, have you ever stopped to think about where the word Muslim comes from? Maybe you associate it directly with Islam, but what if I told you it goes far beyond that? That its root carries a profound and universal meaning, a message of peace that transcends borders and religions. And the most fascinating part, all of this traces back to the patriarch Abraham, a figure revered not only by Islam, but also by Judaism and Christianity. Curious? So stay with me, because what we're going to explore now might change the way you see the connection between these traditions. When we talk about Muslim, the word may sound like something strictly religious, but at its core, its essence is tied to a very simple and powerful idea: peace. Yes, peace. The term comes from the Arabic root salam, which means peace, harmony. Being a Muslim in this broader sense is being in a state of peaceful submission to the divine will, and that is where the connection with Abraham, or Ibrahim as he is called in the Quran, comes in. Abraham is not just a historical figure, he is a living symbol of faith and devotion. According to Jewish, Christian, and Islamic traditions, he was a man who unconditionally trusted in God, to the point of being willing to sacrifice his own son to prove his devotion. Of course, at the last moment, God replaced the human sacrifice with a ram, showing that it was not the blood, but Abraham's faith that mattered, and that is why he is considered the father of all those who live by faith. Now, what does this have to do with the word Muslim? According to the Quran, it was Abraham himself who used this term for the first time. He referred to himself and his followers as Muslim, that is, those who peacefully submit to the will of God. Think about it for a moment. Even before Islam existed as a formal religion, the idea of being Muslim was already there, in the essence of someone who lives for peace and faith. It is something that transcends dogmas and labels. But here's the question that might be on your mind. If Muslim means someone who seeks peace and submission to God, then why do we see so much division among religions today? To understand this, we need to delve into history and scriptures. Both Judaism and Christianity and Islam recognize Abraham as a central figure. He is the bridge between these traditions, a living proof that there is more in common among them than differences. However, over time, human interpretations of the scriptures, combined with political interests and power struggles, ended up creating barriers. What was meant to be a unifying message often became a point of conflict. But when we return to the roots, to Abraham's message, we realize that the goal has always been peace. The word salam, just like shalom in Hebrew, is not just a greeting, it is a call to live in harmony, both with God and with one's neighbor. And if we look more closely, we will see that this message is present in all the major religious traditions. The Torah, the Gospel, and the Quran share the idea that what is permitted or prohibited in dietary laws, rituals, and behaviors is not arbitrary. Everything has a greater purpose, to teach us to live in balance, in peace with the divine and with others. When the Quran says that God gave humans rules for what is pure and permitted, halal, this is directly linked to the same principle we find in the Torah and the Gospel. And here is the most surprising part. In all these traditions, the division we see today is not in the original words of the scriptures, but in the interpretations that came later. When we understand that Abraham already preached the idea of peaceful submission, we realize that there is a common ground that can unite us, even amidst differences. So, the next time you hear the word Muslim, think beyond the label. Think of someone who seeks peace, who seeks harmony with God and the world around them. Think of Abraham, a man who, regardless of the religion you follow, left a legacy that still challenges us today, to live in peace, in communion, and in faith. Let's explore how this idea of peace and submission is reflected in the dietary practices of different religions. But for now, I want to know from you, what does peace mean in your life? How do you seek it in your daily life? Leave it in the comments because I can hardly wait to hear your perspective. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel and share this video with someone who might be interested in the topic. Have you ever stopped to think about why some religions consider certain animals pure for consumption and others not? Have you ever stopped to think about why some religions consider certain animals pure for consumption and others not? And more than that, why do these rules exist for thousands of years and still make sense today? Maybe you have already heard about the dietary prohibitions involving pork or other animals, but what if I told you that at its core, these laws are not just about what we eat, but about how we live? Yes, the relationship between faith, food, and sustainability can be much deeper than we imagine. Let's go back in time, thousands of years ago, when the first human groups began to live in agricultural and pastoral communities. Imagine a society where survival was a daily challenge. Food was not just a resource, it was a precious gift, and knowing what could or could not be consumed made all the difference. It was in this context that dietary laws emerged, both in Judaism and Islam, as a form of protection, not only spiritual, but also practical. For example, the Quran, just like the Torah, establishes very clear rules about permitted foods. And one point that always generates curiosity is, why are ruminants, like cows and goats, considered pure, while animals like pigs are prohibited? Well, there is a fascinating explanation behind this. These ruminant animals, which have a unique digestive system, are capable of transforming simple natural resources, such as grass, into energy. They represent the idea of harmony with creation, living sustainably and providing benefits to the community, whether through meat, milk, or labor. Now let's talk about the pig, which is often the most well-known example among forbidden foods. Culturally, the pig is seen as an impure animal. But did you know that this prohibition also has ecological roots? Pigs do not ruminate, do not graze, and have eating habits that make them poorly compatible with the idea of sustainability in a natural environment. Moreover, in hot regions where these laws originated, the consumption of pork could pose a health risk due to the lack of refrigeration and the possibility of diseases like trichinosis. In other words, the rules were not only spiritual, but also practical and protective of the community's health. And here's something even more interesting. These dietary laws, like those described in Surah Al-An'am, do not just talk about what we can or cannot eat. They invite us to reflect on our relationship with the natural world. When the Quran guides us to consume food that is halal, that is pure and permitted, it also reminds us to live in harmony with the environment. The same principle appears in the Torah, where kosher laws emphasize respect for animals and divine creation. But how does this connect to the modern world? Today, we see a growing movement towards conscious and sustainable consumption. Practices such as veganism, vegetarianism, and even slow food resonate with the values of these ancient traditions. The idea of eating with awareness, respecting the environment and health, is more relevant than ever. This shows how these laws, which emerged in specific historical contexts, still have something to teach us. And I want to ask you a question. Have you ever stopped to think about the impact of your food choices? Not just on your health, but on the environment and collective well-being. This reflection, which began with Abraham and spread through generations, continues to challenge us today. In the next segment, we will explore how these food traditions influence not only our individual choices, but also the way we build communities. But before that, I want to know, what is your connection with food? Is it just sustenance or something deeper? Have you ever wondered what really divides us? Could it be our beliefs, cultures, or choices? Or is it that deep down, these differences are just reflections of the way we interpret the world around us? Now imagine if there was something powerful enough to unite us, something so simple and essential that it could transcend the barriers we create. And if I told you that this something is food, yes, food, because at its core, the act of eating is universal, but the meaning we give to it is profoundly human. Throughout history, religious traditions have played a fundamental role in how we relate to food. Food practices are not just rules. They carry meanings, memories, and values that connect us to the divine, to others, and to ourselves. But there is something we often forget. These same traditions that seem to divide us on the surface are, in fact, bridges. And it is about these bridges that I want to talk to you today. Let's start with the concept of purity. Both in Judaism, Islam, and Christianity, the idea of purity is deeply connected to the act of eating. But what is purity? In Judaism, kosher laws are not just about what is permitted to consume, but about how to live a holy life, reflecting the holiness of God. In Islam, the concept of halal reminds us that everything we consume must be pure and obtained fairly, reflecting respect for divine creation. And in Christianity, although dietary laws have been reinterpreted over time, the idea of purity transcends the plate and reaches the heart, emphasizing intentions and actions. Now, you must be thinking, if all these traditions have such deep values in common, why then is there so much division? The answer lies in interpretations and human influences. For example, for centuries, political and social issues have shaped the way religions have interacted with each other. Disputes over territory, power, and influence often overshadowed shared values. But if we look at the original scriptures, we see something surprising: a common foundation of respect, harmony, and the pursuit of peace. And this is where food comes in as a powerful symbol. Have you ever noticed how sharing a meal has the power to break down barriers? No matter where you come from or what you believe in, when you sit at the table with someone, something magical happens. There is an exchange, not just of food, but of stories, of humanity. It's as if for a moment, all the differences disappeared, and what remained was what really matters, the connection. But for that to happen, we need to go beyond the labels. We need to see food traditions as opportunities, not limitations. For example, the fact that Jews, Muslims, and Christians have distinct dietary practices should not be seen as an obstacle, but as an opportunity to learn from each other. Did you know that interfaith communities are organizing dinners where kosher, halal, and traditional Christian dishes are served side by side? These events are not just celebrations of food. They are celebrations of unity in diversity. And here's something even more interesting. When we explore the roots of these traditions, we realize that they share values like gratitude, respect, and compassion. Think of halal slaughter in Islam, which includes a prayer and practices that minimize the animal's suffering. Now compare this with kosher rules, which also emphasize respect and care in food preparation. Even with differences in the details, the principle is the same: a deep respect for creation and the act of eating. In Christianity, this idea manifests in a different but equally powerful way. The freedom to eat, introduced in the teachings of Jesus and in the writings of Paul, is not an invitation to irresponsibility, but a call to empathy. It's like saying, use your freedom to build, not to divide. And that is exactly the message we need today. We live in a world where divisions are increasingly evident, but we also live in a time where the need for connection is more urgent than ever. And food can be that bridge. Imagine a world where, instead of focusing on our differences, we celebrate what we have in common, where food traditions are not seen as barriers, but as gateways to dialogue and mutual learning. Now, I want to invite you to reflect. How do you see food in your life? Is it just sustenance or something more? Could it be that by sharing a meal with someone different from you, you could discover new ways to connect and learn? This is the beauty of food. It not only nourishes the body, but also the soul. Let's explore how these food traditions influence our daily choices and even the global economy. But for now, I want to know, what is your experience with different cultures and their food practices? Have you ever experienced something that challenged your ideas or changed your perspective? Share with me in the comments, because your story is part of this conversation. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel and like this video. What did you have for breakfast today? Leave it in the comments. Have you ever thought about what purity means? Have you ever thought about what purity means? Not in the physical sense, but in the spiritual. What really makes something pure? Would it be the way something is prepared, the intention behind it, or perhaps the impact it has on the world around us? This question, which seems so philosophical, is at the heart of the dietary practices of the major religious traditions. And believe me, it has a lot to teach us about who we are and how we connect with others. In Judaism, kosher laws are a direct reflection of a call to holiness. They are not just rules about what can or cannot be consumed. They are a daily reminder that even the simplest acts, like eating, have spiritual implications. In Islam, the concept of halal invites us to think about the ethical impact of our food choices, emphasizing purity and justice. And in Christianity, the focus shifts to the purity of the heart, to internal transformation. It's as if each tradition is inviting us to look at food as something deeper, something that connects the material to the immaterial. But why does this matter? Simple. These practices teach us to live with more intention. Think about how the Torah and the Quran emphasize respect for animals. In kosher slaughter, for example, there is a concern to minimize the animal's suffering, which reflects a deep respect for divine creation. The same happens in halal slaughter, where a prayer is made to acknowledge God's sovereignty over the animal's life. They are not just practices, they are acts of gratitude and reverence. Now, compare this with what we see in the modern world. Mass consumption often ignores the origin of food, the environmental impact, and even the well-being of the workers involved in production. That's why these ancient traditions are so relevant today. They remind us that food is not just something we put on our plate. It is an expression of values, of who we are and what we believe. And when we talk about Christianity, the approach is different, but equally powerful. With the coming of Jesus, purity became more about what is within us than about what we consume. In Mark 7, Jesus says, "Nothing outside a man can make him unclean by going into him. Rather, it is what comes out of a man that makes him unclean." This does not mean that the previous rules had no value, but that true transformation begins in the heart. It is a message that challenges us to look beyond appearances, beyond external rules, to focus on what truly matters, our actions and intentions. But here is the point that connects all of this. Despite the differences in practices, there is a universal value that runs through all these traditions: respect. Respect for creation, respect for the community, and respect for oneself. When we approach food with this mindset, it ceases to be merely sustenance and becomes an act of connection. Now, I want to ask you a question. How do you view your food choices? Are they just automatic habits, or have you thought about the impact they have on your life and the world around you? Maybe, like me, you are starting to realize that each meal is an opportunity to honor something greater, whether it be God, nature, or life itself. And that's what fascinates me about food traditions. They not only show us how to live with more intention, but also how to find bridges amidst differences. After all, food is universal, but the stories behind it are what make us unique. In the next segment, we will explore how these practices have influenced the modern world, from the economy to the way we connect in a globalized world. But before that, I want to know from you, what does food mean in your life? Is there a dish or a tradition that connects you to your roots or beliefs? Have you ever noticed how, at the end of a good meal, the feeling is not just a full stomach, but a warmed heart? The act of eating together is more than just sustaining the body. It is nurturing something much deeper, our connections, our stories, our humanity. And that is exactly what our journey has been about up to this point. By exploring the dietary traditions of Judaism, Islam, and Christianity, we learn that although different, these practices share a common purpose: to unite the physical and the spiritual, to connect the human to the divine, and to remind us of who we truly are. Today, we live in a world where differences are often used as justifications for division. But what if we look beyond that? And what if we see these differences as pieces of a larger puzzle? Each dietary practice, each ritual, each tradition tells us a part of the human story, a story that speaks of faith, community, and above all, love. In Judaism, the respect for kosher laws is not just a matter of rules, but a connection with the holiness of God. In Islam, halal foods remind us of the importance of justice and reverence for creation. And in Christianity, dietary freedom challenges us to live empathetically, placing love above all. They are different paths, but they point to the same truth. Food is more than something material. It is an expression of values, a tool for unity, and deep down, this is something we can all embrace regardless of our beliefs. Imagine if, instead of using our differences as barriers, we saw them as opportunities for learning. Imagine a world where an interfaith dinner was not a rare event, but something commonplace, where Jews, Christians, and Muslims, and so many other cultures and traditions would sit together at the table to share more than just food, to share stories, laughter, and understanding. This vision may seem idealistic, but it is already happening. In cities around the world, food fairs and events are promoting interreligious dialogues. Halal, kosher, and traditional cuisine are being used to connect people, break down prejudices, and build bridges. And this shows us something powerful. Love can start on a plate. And speaking of love, I can't help but bring a message that summarizes everything we've discussed here. Jesus Christ in John 13:34 said, "A new commandment I give to you, that you love one another. Just as I have loved you, you also are to love one another." This message of love transcends religious boundaries. It is a universal call to live with compassion, respect, and unity. If there is something that food teaches us, it is that we all have a place at the table. No matter where we come from, what we believe, or how we choose to live, the table is a space where stories meet and differences disappear. It is a reminder that deep down, we are all seeking the same things: peace, connection, and meaning. And so we come to the end of our journey. But before we conclude, I want to extend a special invitation to you. If you believe in the message of unity that we discussed here, share this video with someone you love. Subscribe to the channel, like the video, and leave your comment. I really want to know what you thought, what your reflections were, and how you see the idea of unity among religions. And more than that, I want to invite you to live this message. How about organizing a dinner where you and your friends share dishes that represent your cultures and traditions? Or maybe try kosher or halal food for the first time. Small gestures like these have the power to transform the way we connect with each other. Thank you for being with me until now. It was an honor to share this journey with you. And remember, love, just like food, has the power to unite us. Let's continue spreading this message, one meal, one conversation, and one act of love at a time. Until the next video, Jesus Christ is love and peace for humanity.